There he is.
Hi, Carol.
Hey, Jim.
Of course, when you actually read the edit.
You're watching HCAM TV.
Good afternoon, Hopkinton, and welcome to the Hopkinton Hangout Hour. I'm your host, Jim Cousins, and it is Tuesday, the 8th, which means it is Dr. Cavanaugh Day. So, Dr. Cavanaugh, welcome to the Hangout Hour.
Well, thank you for having me, as always.
Always a pleasure. Now, before we get into some questions in chat about what is happening with preparing for school and things that are coming up, I thought that you might just want to talk about the fact that we just scheduled a new school committee meeting for this Thursday and give us an update on what's been happening.
Surely. So the school committee meeting that was scheduled for this Thursday is actually good news. The school district and the Teachers Association have arrived at a tentative agreement. I believe the teachers are voting tomorrow to ratify that tentative agreement, and then it will fall to the school committee on Thursday evening to also vote for that tentative agreement. And if we have a memorandum of agreement in place, all should be right with the world, and we will be beginning school with, agreements with the Nurses Association, the Paraprofessionals Association, and the Teachers Association. So we're feeling great.
That is awesome. Good news to hear. So the teachers have been back. The teachers have been getting ready and have been learning Schoology and have been just kind of putting pieces in place. I was wondering, where have you been? What have you been observing, and how are things going?
So today was the day that the teachers came back in person on campus. Last week for 4 days, Monday to Thursday, they were working remotely, and they were most assuredly working hard. So we have all kinds of new software. We've got Panopto, which makes videos for us. We've got Schoology, which is a learning management system. We have teachers who are taking a course called the Modern Classroom. And so that is kind of designed to help people, push out instruction remotely, and also to, make sure that what's happening on the in-person hybrid day kind of matches with what's going to happen the following day. So we have an awful lot, and obviously for our remote learners, they are fully remote. So we need to think about what it looks like when instruction is done in one place and delivered in another place. So we've been working really hard on those kinds of things, and I feel like we have another 5 days to do that work. So I'm excited that we do, because there's an awful lot of work to be done. In fact, on my way into my office, I could hear Mrs. Parson on the other side of the wall listening to a webinar done by Mr. Ghosh. So that's exciting. I mean, there's an awful lot of technology learning taking place.
Right. Now, at this point, we got our first question, and I'd like to start off with that. And this person, Amanda, is asking if you could explain the traffic flow for HMS and HHS drop-off and pickup points.
So I will certainly be doing that in a formal presentation, like I always do every year through HCAM. So we'll have to schedule that, Jim. But, one of the things that we are trying to do, at least at the middle school, to alleviate some of the traffic is sort of to have kind of a staggered dismissal at the end of the day. So, and I don't want to say which group of kids will be picked up first, second, or third, but each class would have a scheduled pickup time. So for example, maybe the sixth graders will move to the Brown gym just after 1:30, and the eighth graders who would be in a different wing of the building would, be maybe the next group to be dismissed. So what we're hoping happens is that will alleviate a little bit of that bottlenecking that could take place at the end of the school day. And then, at the beginning of the school day, we have just one concern, I think, and that is that we won't be opening our doors until 7:15 in the morning. So the parents who used to come at, 5 minutes of 7 and start that drop-off process, you're welcome to come and drop your student off, but your student is really going to be outside the building until 7:15. And I know you might think, well, gosh, that doesn't seem quite kind, but we really have nowhere in our buildings, especially at the high school, for kids to be able to congregate, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? So that 7:15 drop off time, they can hang out under the tent, they can hang out outside. If it's a nice day, that's fine. But what we're asking people not to do is to start to queue up at 7 o'clock in the morning and not let their students out, because it won't be long before we have traffic that's, outside of the Hopkinton High School parking lot and then extending down Hayden Row Street, which will preclude anyone from travel on Hayden Row Street. So if people could just remember that, we're opening our doors at 7:15 this year, that would be helpful. Oop, Jim, I think you're muted.
I am. I was trying to get something prepared. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I was wondering, Cal, what do you think at this point? I know you've seen the video that some of the high school kids and some of the people at the school have created to kind of give a sense of what the day will be like and what's going on. And it's a quick 3 minutes. What do you think about showing that and letting people see?
The high school video it's excellent. And I'll tell you what I think are some parts of it that I think all parents, whether you are a high school parent or a marathon parent, should see, is the boarding and deboarding of the buses. So when kids get into the bus, no matter the very first child to board that bus should go all the way to the very last seat in the bus. And I know that this is unusual for our kids because typically the older and more mature riders will kind of like navigate to the back of the bus and congregate there. And, some of our younger kids will kind of stay up front where they feel kind of safe and close to the driver. But what we really need for people to do is the first person to board the bus will go to the very back. And then kids, as they board, will take the seat in front. And then when we get to school and we start letting kids off the bus, the front seat should get out first. What this means is that, we will never have kids walking past each other's seats. It's just another safety measure. And, you can see in the buses that the windows need to be open. So there's a lot of information in that video, and the high school kids put it together and did a beautiful job. But I think that what they're telling us kind of district-wide is good messaging K to 12.
Right. And also the spacing all throughout within the school with the seating and even how lunch is being handled and mask breaks.
Yes, I thought the little segment that they had done on mask breaks was great. So you can see the kids, they come outside, they remove their masks, they're distant, but, because they're outside, it's okay for them to, chit chat a little bit. So in addition to it being a mask break, it also felt like, in the video that it was a nice social break. And Mr. Bishop has done a beautiful job of kind of articulating walking single file down either the right hand side of the hallway, regardless of which way you're going. And leaving a good piece of that center in the middle uninhabited. And I also think that releasing kids from classes in kind of a staggered way is going to be helpful at the high school too. So
Right.
you won't have half the entire student body walking that high school at one time.
Right. As well, I don't know if you know this. It would be kind of like an arcane number to know, but do you know how many hand sanitizers now exist in this district? Because I see them everywhere.
I wish I knew that number, but I'm sure that if I asked Mr. Person, he could let me know. We are still waiting on some signage. There's still signage that's coming to us from WB Basin that hasn't come in yet. And I believe that this week the tents should be going up on all of our properties.
Oh, that's great. So all the spots, I assume, been picked out, and they
I
know what
believe
to
that
do.
is true. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think parents are also going to start seeing storage containers on our school grounds as well, because what we're trying to do is eliminate any additional, material, furniture, bookcases, that kind of stuff in the classrooms, so that there's really room for, kids to spread out and socially distance. I know that at Hopkins, for example, we were taking a look at how all of the desks are spread out in the cafeteria to promote social distancing at lunch. And, Mrs. Bolella was saying in the event that she needs to move any students onto the stage, if a lunch was kind of overcrowded, she would have that space, but it meant that any of the furniture that we had piled there over the summer would have to be moved outside into a storage container.
Now that was really interesting because I know that at the high school, there is no storage available anywhere. And when I was hearing, and I do some work in the middle school as well, that they're emptying out all of these rooms, I was thinking, where is that stuff going to go? So that's an interesting answer.
Yes. Well, for a while we had it, in gyms and on stages. And the more we looked around, the more we realized we need those spaces for human beings and not for sort of retired furniture. So.
Right. Are those pod type things where it looks like a little railroad car and you just put stuff in there?
Yes, and in fact, one thing that I have learned in this process, in addition to all of my HVAC knowledge, is that when those pods come, they come on a flatbed and they are picked up by a crane and actually put into place on the school property. So it's a little bit of a to-do to get them here.
Mm. I was just in the middle school cafeteria the other day, and the middle school cafeteria had a lot of things inside that cafeteria. I was wondering, did Tim Pearson figure out how many of those you need? I wonder if that's a large number as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I would love to have those numbers now. You're making me curious about it, but yeah, I mean, the building and grounds and maintenance people have spent an inordinate amount of time this summer just moving furniture. When people are kind of wondering what they're doing besides all the installation of hand sanitizers and putting, hand towels back in the restrooms. And we just removed a lot of those hand towel dispensers in favor of having, an air unit in there. And now we're putting them all back in because we want kids to, simply dry their hands and get rid of the towel. So in addition to that kind of work and all the furniture moving and posting signage and ordering up tons and tons and tons of plexiglass that they have positioned all over the schools, I mean, they certainly do look like different places.
Right. You had said there was $100,000 worth of plexiglass in the high school. So I assume are there some grants from, I don't know, the state or the federal that it's helping out with some of this COVID-19 preparation?
Yes, absolutely. And I know that we've given numbers before, but the town received 1.6 million. The schools got about 900,000 for COVID-related expenditures. And then there's ESSER money that is connected to curriculum, and that was in the dollar amount of 50,000. So there has been an awful lot of federal money that has come into the district. And I mean, without that, we would not be able to sort of open our doors in the way that we are, for sure.
Right, right. A person online is asking if there will be people directing traffic at the exit and entrance. So, and she didn't specify whether it's high school or middle school or what school. So I was just wondering if you just wanted to kind of address in general what may be happening at the schools and where more information can be found or will be forthcoming from.
Sure. So I know that, you'll get information from building principals, obviously, and I am happy to, put more information out through an HCAM broadcast. But usually what happens with directing traffic is on those very first days of school, what we're trying to do is establish patterns and kind of get people used to them. And we're really unsure about what traffic is going to look like this year because, technically only 50% of our kids are coming to school. But at the high school and middle school complex, the majority of the people who are coming to school will be drivers. We had put out a survey asking parents how many of them would be able to drive their children because we can't put more than 26 students on a 77 passenger bus. And so many parents and families, and we are grateful for this, have stepped up and said, certainly I would be able to drive my children if, it meant that we would be able to transport kids to school safely and open our doors. But in the early days of school, we always have the Hopkinton Police Department out there with us, helping with, kind of navigating and directing traffic. And I am sure that this year will be, no different from all of the others. I'm sure that Chief Bennett and our school resource officers, Officer Stickney, Officer Santoro, and Officer Powers will be out there with us. And of course, all of the administrators are typically out there on opening day, making sure that the traffic moves as smoothly as it possibly can. And it will be interesting to see what happens on the 16th and 17th. We think we've kind of got it figured out. Mr. Keller has done some soft numbers, and what he thinks is that there will be just as many people driving and picking up now on a 50% day as there used to be on a 100% day. So we don't think that the traffic will change all that much in terms of numbers, but there will still be a lot of maneuvering that has to happen out there to ensure that we get kids in and out of our buildings quickly.
Right. And have things been, I'm not really sure. I haven't really seen the middle school congestion or how many cars are coming like that. I know that recently the high school just reconfigured with putting the buses in the back of the school and kind of changing that bus loop. And also all the work that was done outside on the street there. So has it been your experience that last year was an improvement over previous years?
You know what I think, when we all sort of follow the rules, the traffic goes very smoothly. So for example, this year, if we are staggering the dismissal of grades 6, 7, and 8, and say, for example, we ask all of the 6th grade parents to be that first kind of line of pickup, we really need for the parents to be there and be prepared, but we can't have an 8th grade parent sitting in that line so that the line just stops because, now we're waiting on an 8th grader who is not going to be dismissed for another 15 minutes. So people are really going to have to kind of, pay attention to what the rules are, so to speak, if we want things to flow and to flow smoothly. And I think it takes a village. So we're grateful when people are attentive to what we're asking and are willing to participate in positive and productive ways. So
therein lies the rub, right? You have to pay attention to the rules and you have to understand and follow them.
Yeah.
Which, we're all human. I do think that Massachusetts has seemed do a pretty good job through this whole pandemic about following the rules that have been set out. And that's why we went from a really high rate down to a really low rate. So, so many people have been so focused on the start of school this year. It's been so different. And so it took so much to get to this point that I think you have a lot of awareness out there and what's going on.
Yes, and I say this every time we have one of these segments, Jim, but if we take a look at the Department of Public Health, their little icon that says it all starts here, and there's just the outline of a house with the Hopkinton H inside. I think that that's very true. I hope now that people are kind of doing that soft quarantining thing, that you're wearing masks wherever you go, that you're limiting your exposure to even places like the grocery store, because we really want to make sure that we are able to open our doors and keep them open. On Thursday evening, this will be interesting to some of our viewers. In addition to the school committee hopefully being able to approve the memorandum of agreement with the Teachers Association, Sean McAuliffe, who is the Director of Public Health, and I will be kind of co-presenting something on what to expect if a student tests positive, if a teacher tests positive, if a group of students test positive, and where that kind of lies in terms of like a flow chart and how those decisions are made. So I think people may want to tune into that and really get a good understanding of what it would mean if a child or a staff member tested positive, and how that will impact the entire school community.
Yeah, I agree with, and I second that. Information is so important. I remember, Sean, a few weeks ago when we were talking about, on one of our shows, we were talking about protecting yourself and what is safe and what is not safe. And he came out with a really interesting thing. He said, if you were going to think about a group that is going to be high at risk, you might think about the cashiers at Price Chopper, because there are a lot of people going right by them every day. And how many people do you think that work in that position have gotten COVID-19? I was like, I don't know. He said one. He said one person, and in fact, when they did the review and the contract tracing, they think this person got it outside of there. So for me, that gave me a lot of not comfort, but like a lot of kind of comfort, that there's information out there, people paying attention, and there are not a dozen different things that you need to do. There's a few things that you need to do. And, you can make things pretty much as safe as we can in this environment.
Yes, I do think that places like Price Chopper, we've been in touch with people who work in hospitals, and when we look at some of those numbers, the three biggies are always wear that mask, a lot of hand hygiene and social distancing. And what we are seeing is that will kind of contain the transmission of the virus. So we are hopeful that we're going to be able to practice those things and keep our doors open and ensure really good teaching and learning for students in Hopkinton.
Exactly. Now we have a question, and I don't think you're going to answer it because I don't think that you can answer it at this time. But I do want to recognize the question so that you can talk about when this information may become public. This person was asking about if there was an update on the live stream option for remote instruction, including AP and accelerated classes, and asking if this has been revisited. And I know that there has been discussion about this, and I don't know if you can talk about it or at least when we might hear about it.
Sure. So I think at the last school committee meeting, I had indicated that the Teachers Association and the district were working very hard. And the two things that we were still working on at that point in time were remote teaching. In the event that the entire district went remote, where would the teachers teach from? And the second thing was live streaming. So yes, we have in fact revisited live streaming. I can't really say much more about it than it has been a topic in negotiations. But in the event that the teachers are able to ratify the memorandum of agreement tomorrow, when we have the school committee meeting on Thursday evening, there will be a PowerPoint presentation that sort of explains what all of that live streaming might look like in the event that it is going to happen. One thing I will also say is, there was a lot of worry on the part of parents. Will my children have a Hopkinton High School teacher? And we've worked really, really hard to ensure a few things. One was to, obviously ensure that we were able to keep all of our employees working as teachers, to the greatest extent that we could. And, sort of the second thing was to make sure that we were putting Hopkinton High School and Hopkinton Public School teachers in front of all of our kids, K to 12. At this point, we have, I think, 145 students who have opted for remote instruction exclusively, entirely elected remote instruction. And if you think about it, all of those 145 kids have, 7 class periods during the day. So, doing the math on that, we're talking like we could be at, 1,000 courses very, very easily that we would have to buy seats for, so to speak. When we talk about VHS, you might buy a seat in chemistry or buy a seat in math or buy a seat in social studies. But I think we have the seat buying down now to about 170 maybe courses. I think it's about 170 courses. 170 seats, which only means like an individual class for an individual student, to be very clear. So we really have been able to do, I think, an amazing amount of work. Schedules should be coming out in about 37 minutes to people at the secondary level, and the elementary people will be getting their, letters and teacher assignments and all of that. The kindergarten student information will be coming by United States Postal Service. So I know that may disappoint some kindergartners today, but the good old-fashioned U.S. Postal Service will be delivering their information to them. So I think that we're in pretty good shape in the way of delivering sort of top quality instruction. And I hope that we have some more and interesting news for people on Thursday evening.
That's great. And we should say that school committee airs on HCAM Ed So if you are on Verizon, you can channel 31, you'll find it there. And if you're on Comcast, you'll find us on channel 96. And of course, we will be live streaming it on our YouTube channel as well. And probably our Facebook feed as well, too. We recently added that capability. So all kinds of ways to connect with that.
Yes, and I think there really will be interesting information on Thursday night, so people should tune in.
Absolutely. All right. Another person is asking, and again, I do think that the school is doing a pretty decent job of pushing information out there, and there's a lot of new information. So I could put this out there as if you have a general update or what you know about this or when people may find it. They're asking if they are picking up a high school student and a middle school student at the end of school, have those two schools coordinated time-wise?
Yeah, so I'm going to hesitate to answer that one right now, just because I want to make sure that we have all of the sort of pickup times at the end of the school day down pat. But I can assure parents that, if you are picking up two kids, we'll work it out so that you're not, stuck in a space for 20 minutes thinking, oh my goodness, my sixth grader's in the car, but the 11th grader still is in that room learning social studies right now.
Right.
We'll figure that out.
Okay. I got a note from Bob who puts school committee meetings on HCAM Ed. It's a very good point. He would like people to know that you can watch this on HCAM Ed, but during school committee meetings, we don't take questions, we don't take comments. So the school committee is not monitoring. We actually turn commenting off on our YouTube feed, and we don't monitor our Facebook feed to give information to the school committee.
Yes, and I can also say that, public comment is always available at our public meetings, and we're happy to read them, because even though we're meeting in person, we don't invite people in person just because of the pandemic. And we're happy to read them, but even if we read them, they are really just a comment. We don't, or the school committee doesn't answer the question or resolve the issue there in real time.
So how would somebody get their questions to the school committee?
When I send out an email on Thursday mornings, there's always an email address that they can send any kind of a comment to. They can, typically what will happen is that will go right to the school committee, but if they also wanted to send it to my office, I can forward that to the school committee as well.
Okay. And just curious, I understand that they don't address questions in real time. I understand that. Do they take that knowledge? Do they ever come back at a subsequent meeting and say, we had this question, we thought about it, this is the answer? Or do they just kind of take it and run with it?
Well, typically, if it's something that warrants some kind of a response, we will respond to the sender, or sometimes we end up doing an entire presentation. So if people have, say, for example, transportation concerns, at some point we might say, what, let's just do a good old-fashioned 30, 40, 1-hour transportation presentation, so that all of these questions can kind of be answered. And sometimes people are just making a public comment where they want to state their opinion.
Okay, great. Did you see that one recently? Person went to a town meeting and a town meeting, like a board of selectmen meeting or a select board meeting, and wanted to change the name from boneless chicken wings because that person thought it was the wrong term. So people go up there and give a lot of different comments in different areas.
I did not see that, Jim.
Yeah, that was a strange one. So at the last town meeting, speaking of town meetings, there were a few things on the agenda that got approved. And I was wondering, we haven't really talked about that. And I was wondering if you could kind of give us an update on how those projects that were approved then are progressing.
Yes. So as anyone in the community knows, any of the capital projects have been put on hold, but maybe the ones that they would be most interested in, which were not put on hold, are the modulars at Elmwood and Hopkins. So they are slated to be ready for opening day on the 16th of September. But that said, we might be picking up our occupancy permits for those on the 15th of September. So that's how close to the deadline we are on those projects. But we are very excited to have those new classrooms. And given where we are with the pandemic, so one of the things that is true is that if I used to be in a smaller size classroom delivering instruction to small groups, say for example, speech and language or reading support or any of those kinds of things, I can't meet in that small space anymore. So what we've done is we've taken some of our remote teachers who are working in the building but teaching kids remotely. They're moving into the smaller spaces, and the people with 4 or 5 students are moving into the much larger spaces. So I guess I've gone a long way to say that those new classrooms will come in quite handy at this point in time, just because we are socially distancing people. And then the high school project is underway. It was never the intent for the high school project to be open this September. We really were anticipating starting the project this summer. So we're hoping that sometime in the spring, things will be ready to open that wing of the high school. What we are finding with construction projects is that because of COVID, what they're doing is sort of isolating contractors, so to speak. So, on one day, all the plumbers can come in, another day, the electricians can come in, or one plumber and one electrician, where before you could have in full crews. So those kinds of things are slowing down a little bit. And then I understand that getting materials is, also a little bit slower in this process. So those are some of the things that might have been holding up our projects, but gladly our Elmwood and Hopkins projects will be ready to go.
So the capital project, is it only a time delay, or is that also adding cost to the projects? Do we know at this point?
Well, I think that when I say that there's a delay in capital projects, I think that that is townwide. Every department has been asked to delay any of their capital. And I think that that is going all the way until the next town meeting. I think that those are all just really put on hold. And that really might be a much better question for Mr. Kamalo, but that's my understanding.
Okay. All right. And for this week's town meeting on the 12th, being held outside in the fresh air at Hopkinton High School, do you have anything besides the budget? Anything that's like pandemic related, or anything that's come up that we need to mention?
No, really, I think the only thing that Mrs. Rodmick and I are presenting at that town meeting, we have maybe 7 slides that, sort of show people that we started out with a budget of, I think it was 8.9. The budget that we're presenting is 6.6. And when I say that, I mean a 6.6% increase over FY20. And there might just be 6 or 7 slides there, because I know that, the community wants to get through town meeting in a single day. So we're all being factual and expedient and not taking an awful lot of time, because that's the safest way to run this town meeting and conduct the town's business.
Excellent. Okay. Now, the thing I'm curious about, as everybody says everywhere, this is an unprecedented time. No one has lived through a pandemic right now like this. And there are 4,000 kids that our school system is taking care of. And we've talked a lot about how things are looking and plans that have been put in place. I was curious if you could talk a little bit about going through this process. Actually, I'm going to break the questions up. First, going through this process, what have you learned? What has struck you? What has impressed you? What are your reactions to what you've gone through?
Well, it feels like the sands were always shifting. We were promised that we were going to get guidance from DESE on the 25th of June, and there was some, I don't know, like sort of heightened sense that this was going to be really, really important information. And the moment you got it, you should disseminate it to everyone in your organization. And when we got it, it kind of savored of anticlimax, because there wasn't much more there than what we anticipated. I think that you could really sense in that guidance that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education wanted all kids back in school. And that's why they went with the 3 feet of social distancing. And at the time we were hearing that, kids wouldn't catch the virus and that kids wouldn't transmit the virus and that kids weren't carriers of the virus and all of that. And, as we've watched, more medical information has, dispelled some of those ideas that came to us as not long ago as June 25th. But I guess the whole process is really interesting because you're feeling your way in the dark. How do you get half of the high school into that building at one time, socially distanced? So you work through that problem. And how then do you find the money to buy all of those pieces of plexiglass? So you work through that problem. And then how do you serve lunch to 300 students in 4 different waves at Hopkins, at desks, in a cafeteria where somebody is wiping them down, before the kids come in and after the kids leave. So you solve that problem. How do you establish a, COVID waiting room, so to speak, in addition to your nurse's office? How do you free up space for that? And what does it look like in that space so that the nurse is safe and children who enter that are safe? So you work through that problem. It's just every day someone throws a new problem at you. And at the same time, you're also trying to design teaching and learning. I think for the building principals, what has been really terrible is that we start creating schedules and class lists and teacher assignments and familiar peers and all of those things early on. And building principals will literally spend countless hours, like hundreds of hours, putting those things together. And then all of a sudden, one day you wake up and all of that is blown up and someone tells you you've got to start all over again. And it wasn't until August 3rd that we asked parents to commit one way or the other. We said, you've got to tell us, are you going to be hybrid or are you going to be remote? So all of the hours that building principals spent in the spring, they had to re-spend between the dates of August 3rd and today, when parents are going to get those schedules in about 24 and a half minutes. So it has been an enormous amount of work for building principals and assistant principals and guidance personnel. We've had the guidance department at the middle school, and this is not to be funny because it's a little funny, but not funny. They had come in a few weeks ago, revamped the schedule. We thought we were done. Then they came in again, revamped the schedule, and we thought we were done. And then they came in a third time and recreated the schedule once more. And all of that has happened since August 3rd. So, I mean, it's nonstop, round the clock. You're doing it 24/7.
Right. Wow. Now, obviously, one of the fears and worries about starting the school year is what we have been seeing happen in communities across America, where people are having super spreader events, where college students have not been listening to the guidance of the colleges and, gathering in large groups and having big problems like that. You've touched upon it in past episodes, and I thought it's really interesting, and it's worth kind of mentioning again and describing. One of the most important things that we need to do as a community is just watch what we're doing, because as you said, every night, every school disinfected and cleaned. So when the students come in, that school is clean. And while they're there, we're doing all these things with masks and separation and stuff like that. However, they go home at the end of the school day, and it then becomes the responsibility of the parents for what they're doing and where they're going and how they are keeping themselves safe. And I think that's really important for people to consider when they're going through this fall.
Yes, you talk a little bit about, those super spreader events, and, those happen when people are not practicing safety. And, when you take your mask off and you are around people face to face, in very close proximity to one another for a very long period of time, it's so easy for that virus to be transmitted. And, I sometimes go back to the story of the wedding in Maine, and which was very widely spread all over the news. And one of the things that stood out for me with that story was that, some very innocent people who hadn't left their houses had some kind of contact with someone just even coming to the door to deliver food or those kinds of things. There's, the Hopkinton public school community, and then there's the Hopkinton community. And, in those two groups of people, the people who live in our school, the people who live in our community, there are some very vulnerable people. And I think that we have to consider our own actions all the time and say to ourselves, how are my actions impacting the people in my school and the people in my community? It's so important now, more important than ever before, to be responsible to one another. So am I worried about a super spreader event? I most certainly am. And, full disclosure, I was leaving school committee the other night, and it was so Thursday evening, we're leaving the high school, and it was after 9:30. And, there are a lot of kids that are hanging around in the parking lot and, hanging out with one another. And, one look tells you that kids aren't wearing masks. So, it's fine if all of the kids in that group are not COVID positive. But as you said, Jim, it only takes one to be COVID positive to transmit that virus to 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 others. And, if you unwittingly come into our schools or you unwittingly meet up with people in our community, even when you happen to be COVID positive, that puts everybody in a compromised place. So yes, that is something that the schools, Rich Cormier, our athletic director, it's one of the messages that he has to continue to give to coaches and athletes. Mr. Bishop and all of our principals, really, these are the messages that we have to give to our students over and over and over again. And I know that I've asked families to do that soft quarantining, but I'm really hoping that people are taking that to heart, not only for themselves, but also for the people in the community.
Right. Now, it's very interesting as you talk about that. It made me think, in the college experience, college students have a great deal of freedom, which is allowing them to potentially get themselves into trouble. As we know, most brains are still growing until age 25. And it makes me think, in our school system, right? It's K through 12, and there is a huge amount of growth in there. So, for example, at the high school, those kids have the most autonomy and the most responsibility throughout. So I was wondering if you could kind of touch upon what conversations and what different vectors you consider at different grade levels as being, we need to address things, and concerns that we have by age.
Yeah, so it feels like it will be a whole lot easier to deal with kids when they are, 5, 6, 7, 8, because typically those kids are kids that will, do what we like. So, when you're thinking about kids coming back into Marathon or Elmwood, for example, we're worried about things like, should we have to clean, the playground equipment when the kids go out to recess or not? And, where do you sort of position the hand sanitizer? And thank goodness we have sinks in all of our classrooms so kids can do hand washing right in the classroom. So those are the kinds of things that you think about there. But other than a kid who might be a little bit, clingy, some of our kids at that age, they're huggers, and that's who they are, because that's the kind of, experiences they have from home that they bring into the classroom. So that might be a 5-year-old worry. But when we're looking at our 15-year-olds, it's, that social piece. I mean, it would be unnatural to think that human beings, our kids from K to 12, are not social beings. They very much are. So now they have to relearn school, especially at the secondary level. And these are kids who have been going to school for 10, 11, 12, 13 years, right? And now we're asking them to sort of relearn socialization and relearn school. And that's very challenging for them. So, I think the teachers have a lot of control over the 5-year-olds. The teachers have less control over the 15-year-olds. So as we, I think in some ways we refer to that as a gradual release of responsibility, right? We're very responsible for our 5-year-olds. We're far less responsible for our 15-year-olds because we trust them to make good decisions. And I think that's where, our bread is going to be buttered, so to speak. We really are going to need our high school kids and our middle school kids to make good choices.
Mm. When you have been developing the policies and the procedures in coordination with the rest of the administration, where are resources for information that you have looked to, whether it be Hopkinton community circles or peer leaders, I don't know what, or state, federal levels. I'm just like, where do you start from?
So we started obviously with the DESE guidance, but the CDC has a really lovely page that they continue to update on what's appropriate for schools. So that's a really nice resource, I think, for school leaders. I also have a nice network in all of the local, superintendents. In fact, just this morning, one of the superintendents in a neighboring district had said, what is it that you're doing to help your community understand what will happen in the event that a single kid or a cohort of kids or there's a really widespread transmission, that kind of positive testing in a building. And so 3 or 4 of us kind of put our heads together this morning and just shared all the resources that we have. So that's always really nice. And then Sean McAuliffe and Casey Morrow at the DPH are amazing. If I contact Sean, it's always, less than 24 hours and I have a really comprehensive answer in my inbox. And then my last group of kind of go-tos are the school nurses. Our head nurse is Kathy Bain, and whenever you need anything, she is right there. The nurses have provided training, and all 5 of them will stand before an entire school's faculty, helping people understand how do you put the mask on, how do you take the mask off, once you've touched your mask in a mask break, how do you hand sanitize, what's going to be important if you have a student in your classroom who has symptoms. So there's been an awful lot of that kind of information, and it comes from so many different places. I guess I should also say, and I've probably said this on this show before, is that no one is an expert in the coronavirus, right? We have people who are, epidemiologists, virologists, medical doctors, and they're sort of handling that side of things. And then we have people who are facilities experts. So they know everything about HVAC, and they know lots of things about, how do I use the electrostatic sprayer and those kinds of things in terms of cleaning buildings. And then you've got experts in education. So what does it look like if I'm only going to see a student in person every day? How do I make sure that information gets out to the kids who are remote? So all of those people have to kind of come together because each one of them is a piece of the puzzle, and we all need each other to make sure that this is going to work. So, I don't think it's just the CDC and the fellow superintendents, but it's all of those people in our institution that come together who seem to know an awful lot. And those are the ways that we make decisions. Will this ever be risk-free? No, but we've done a good job, I think, of mitigating the risk.
Right. Now, you mentioned DESE. Could you say what that is for people who might not know?
Surely, yes. That DESE is the acronym for the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And throughout the summer, we've even had webinars with the Commissioner of Education weekly. So, we continue to get updates about what he thinks is appropriate for school districts. But, again, what he sends out or what his special education director, Russell Johnston, sends out, any of the people who are working at the department, what they send out is always guidance, and you make decisions at the local level.
So you're responsible to the local level, not to DESE.
That is correct. Yes. I mean, there would be aspects that we would be responsible for. So the commissioner has said he's not sure whether or not he will be having MCAS, but as for now, there will be MCAS tests in the spring of 2021. So that's the premise under which we're operating. He's also said, and this is non-negotiable as well, that we are teaching to all of the standards in all of the frameworks, and we're doing that for 170 days this year. So yeah.
No, that's a really important thing. That's a really important thing, because a lot of the questions that we've had in the past are people concerned about that, about, last year when this first happened, it was very difficult trying to transition and go to remote teaching and following things along. And I think it's very important that there is a strong statement like that we're teaching all the standards just in this new environment.
Yes.
Now, when you look to DESE and when you look to the CDC, now the CDC, I understand, right? CDC, they're medical, and that's the stuff that they do. Mm-hmm. DESE, I wouldn't think so much, right? So, do you know, like, are are the guidelines that you're getting from DESE divergent from what the CDC has been recommending?
So early on, the guidelines, when we learned that American Pediatrics were also in support of, the 3 feet of social distancing, that is not something that we had heard from the CDC. All summer long or since March, we had been hearing 6 feet of social distancing. When you went to the grocery store or Home Depot or wherever you traveled, there were markers on the floor. They were all 6 feet apart. So we had sort of assimilated, I think, as a society that 6 feet, was the amount of social distancing that would be requisite to prevent transmission of the disease. So that 3 feet, I think, really jarred people when we first saw that. Another thing that has happened is that our DPH, the guidelines and recommendations from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health and our local Department of Public Health were also not in sync with some of the DESE guidelines. And so we had to kind of figure out how could those two things come together. And I believe now that DESE and the Mass Department of Public Health have been working together so that the messaging is now consistent from both organizations. So that has been very tricky to kind of explain to people. We still have parents who will call on the phone and say, help me understand how you can have 60 students at 6 feet apart eating lunch with their masks off in a cafeteria when we can't have, a wedding, say, for example, with more than 50 people in this particular venue that's open air in Massachusetts. And it's hard to have to say to people that the rules that apply, for the rest of Massachusetts, according to Governor Baker, are a little bit different than the ones that apply to us in public schools.
And does the CDC have information for public schools or for schools?
They do. So the CDC does have exclusively public school information, and that would sort of corroborate what we have chosen to do as a school district. So we are in compliance with Mass DPH, with DESE, and with the CDC.
Okay. So we are coming close to the end of our time. I'm going to ask you a really easy question.
Okay.
Are we ready?
I think we're ready, Jim. I do. I think if, it's not we were thinking about opening day. And, if we thought about Mrs. Bolello, Mrs. Carver, Mrs. DeBow, Mr. Keller, and Mr. Bishop, and then if you thought about people in the central office, so all of the directors here and assistant superintendent, among us, if you looked at our whole career, we probably had about 200 years of opening day behind us, right? So we know how to do opening day. We just don't know if we know how to do opening day in a pandemic. But given all of the things that that you can put into place for a pandemic, we've got all of those things in place. And so we are hoping that, opening day is going to go well, but so too is the school year. And I think the really important thing about the school year going well is just, doing all of the right things both in school and out of school. I think too that the professional learning that the teachers have undergone, whether that means I'm learning to use this learning management system, I can now make videos like a champion. I know what really good remote instruction looks like. I'm communicating with my kids, all the time. I think the teachers are ready too. Yeah. Yep.
Yep, great. And also, I meant to respond to because you were talking about the teachers earlier. I'm sorry, you were talking about the nurses earlier, and it was really nice to hear that because, as you might expect, in my experience, I have seen anybody who is in the medical field is spending so much time of their own time researching and getting information and looking at it that they're really focused on this and they really have a lot of knowledge on this. And I really look to them for guidance.
Yes, prior to this meeting, I met with Kathy Bain, who is our head nurse today. And, we were just sort of sharing resources back and forth about what's appropriate to send out to elementary families. She has a host of research and all kinds of really nice materials to go out to families, which we'll be pushing out in the next week. And they're really nice materials for elementary families, like how to talk to your children, how to get your child to wear a mask. what to expect when you get to school and see that your teacher has a mask on, all of those pieces, everything from that to how are you going to get your child to understand how important hand washing is. So, she's working round the clock to make sure that those things will be in place. And I know that on the flip side of that, the high school nurse is also, working on things that are appropriate for kids who are, between 14 and 18. So
Right.
yes, our nurses, they're great. Oh, it's so good.
All right. Now you still have 1 week left of working and planning and revising things. But from this perspective, from now, can you tell me what are you going to really be watching and really be looking to observe how the first few weeks of school are rolling out?
Yeah, I think in the very beginning, we'll be looking at sort of the more mechanical pieces, like, are the traffic patterns working? Are the kids socially distant? Are there any technology tools that the teachers need that they don't have, right? So we'll be kind of just monitoring for those kind of very mechanical opening successes. And then after that, I think that we just need to make sure that what's happening in the buildings are meeting our kind of global expectations. Are the kids socially distant? Are we seeing that the numbers in Massachusetts are holding steady or going down? Are we seeing that the numbers in Hopkinton are holding steady or going down? And just keep watching. I mean, we've been monitoring numbers all summer long, and it's easy to get to green or yellow pretty readily on that that map of Massachusetts. And so what we want to do is we want to stay in that unshaded or that white section of the Hopkinton of the state of Massachusetts map, because that's how we know that we're being successful.
Exactly. All right. We do realize that our usual Tuesday show next week is the 15th, which is the day before opening day on the 16th. So I just want to make sure, I don't even know, I haven't even asked you this offline. Will you be okay to come on and spend some time with us on the Hangout Hour the day before?
I think so, sure, yeah.
Okay. So I would expect that, questions at that point will be pretty mechanical, because
Yes.
a lot of information is going to be coming out from all the principals, the administration. So so all the parents should be presented with stuff, and we'll probably get some questions that are pretty detailed on if I have one person here and one person there and stuff like that. But also I would hope that we could use that time for kind of a general overview. Here's what we're expecting. Here's what you should, just as a review for people to, to get to be one final review to get comfortable with these new procedures.
Yes, that would be great. I mean, we did have our traffic meeting last week, and I think we're, internally we have some kind of understanding of what will happen. But I will make a plan with you, Jim, so that we can put together something for HCAM so that people can see it, repeatedly at home with diagrams and arrows and an understanding of what time they should pick up their children where and all of that.
That is perfect. All right. Well, Dr. Cavanaugh, thank you so much for spending this hour with us.
Well, thank you too. I always enjoy being on the Hangout, and it's been really helpful to have you all in place this summer, because I think this forum really gave us the kind of opportunity to get information out to parents that would have been otherwise very difficult to do. So, and I do hope parents will tune in on Thursday so that they can see the kind of information that we have for them then as well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and you know how much we love to connect our community with information, and you've had the most important information over these past couple months. So
well, it's been crazy, but yes.
all right. You have a great rest of your day, and I will catch up with you soon.
All right, thank you very much.
All right. And I would like to thank you for joining us for this episode of the Hangout Hour. I invite you to tune in every weekday at 2:00, and see what is happening and what is going on in our town of Hopkinton. Take care, everybody.
I found this on the web.